Wir sind hier mit Francisco Gonzalez, der gerade Lamplight City entwickelt und machen ein kleines Interview mit ihm. Francisco, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about the world of Lamplight City?
Well, the world of Lamplight City is actually set in an alternate history, Victorian-esque, steampunky kind of past. And I use quotation marks with Victorian because it's not actually Queen Victoria, because it's an alternate past. The idea is that it's set in a fictional city called New Britannia, which Lamplight City is the nickname for this town. And it's set in a United States that's not called America, it's called Vespuccia, and it's still a Commonwealth country, so it's still reigned over by the United Kingdom, so it's kind of like a mixture between 19th century London and New Orleans and 19th century New York, so there's sort of a mishmash of everything.
And what sort of characters and story are you setting in this environment?
So it's a detective game. It's heavily inspired by the work of Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens as far as tone. And you play as a police detective. I'll start it up here so we get a little visual. You play as a police detective turned private investigator named Miles Fordham, who this section is just the prologue of the game that kind of establishes the world and the story. And so the game is about him and his sort of unraveling life, because he has a bit of an unfortunate event that occurs at the end of this prologue, which is that his partner here ends up getting killed. And he starts hearing the voice of his partner, and he's not sure if he's actually hearing the ghost of his partner or if he's just going crazy. So he's under the idea that if he catches the guy who is responsible for his partner's death, then that will give this spirit or this thing in his head some sort of peace, and he'll go away. So he's basically trying to get him to go away so that he can live a normal life again. And so the game is structured so that this is the overarching story, but there's also 5 separate cases within the game that he solves, which are sort of related, but not, he's just doing his detective work to keep himself busy and try not to go crazy. And each of the cases has different solutions and different, there's a right solution, but they have multiple paths. They have multiple suspects that you can accuse. You can get it wrong. You can get everything right. You can be a great detective. You can get everything completely wrong and be the worst detective ever. But the game will still continue. It won't punish you for failing, and it won't automatically guide you to the right solution.
So how do you deal with the challenge that these cases that he's doing in his day-to-day work are not perceived as a distraction from the overarching story, but as an integral part of the game that you also want to solve as a player?
Right, well, I guess narratively the way that I'm dealing with it is by kind of establishing that he doesn't really have any leads as to finding this guy, and by solving cases, the criminal underworld of Lamplight City is sort of interwoven in that, and so he might find a potential lead by investigating these crimes. Plus, he's also getting cases sort of under the table from a contact in the police force, so she's keeping a lookout for him for anything that might be relevant. So in addition to solving the cases for his own peace of mind, he's also doing it so that he can maybe find a way to get back on track to find the guy he's looking for.
In terms of gameplay, is it a very classical point-and-click 2D adventure game? We see it's classical pixel art, or do you have some extra features on top of it?
It's not traditional in certain senses. For example, there's no inventory. I'm very much borrowing from the Westwood Blade Runner game, which was heavily focused on the investigation mechanic and on not solving puzzles, but finding clues and things like that. Obviously, there's no void conf or any photo analyses or anything like that. But it's done in a way where you have a case book. I'll skip through this dialogue here so I can show you this. There's a bit of talking. But yeah, the primary focus is investigation and dialogue and and just sort of finding clues. So like if you find a clue, it'll tell you, your casebook has been updated with a clue, and then you can come up here and access your casebook, and you have your objectives, so you always know what your list of things to do is. You have your clues here that you can analyze. Like she just told you about these lilies that have been stolen. They're investigating a burglary here, so it gives you a little summary of every clue you've found. Later on in the actual game, in the main game, you'll pick up documents here, and you can read them or review them, because whenever you pick up a document, you get a close-up of it. And then when you've progressed enough to name a suspect, it'll list your suspects here, and you'll be able to close the case. But there's no inventory. So for example, I can zip through this real quick, just to give you an example of like how a puzzle might work. So he asks here about a break-in, and she mentions that he can look upstairs. So we'll go upstairs real quick here, and he notices this window here that's got the latch is locked. He looks at it. Also, it's a single-click interface, so one click for everything. It's a context-sensitive thing. So like most things, so this magnifying glass will show up to look at things. So if he examines the latch and he notices that there's a gap in the window, he says, "Oh, look, I think I'm going to conduct an experiment, and I'm going to need a tool." Something long and thin. So you can then get this new objective of getting this tool. So if you look around and you search the environment for stuff, if you go back downstairs, you'll notice that there was these hanging plants. And before we knew that we needed a tool, it was the magnifying glass. But now that we know we need the tool, it's switched to the hand. So this indicates that now he can take it. So he'll take it. And so we have this thing in what would be our inventory, except there's no inventory. So I mean, it's stored as in our casebook that we have it, but now rather than opening up the inventory, clicking on the window and using it, we just click here. Now it's a hand, and he automatically uses it, and then we get a little interactive thing where we can click, and we have to do that. Oh, I did it wrong, but there, do it ourselves. So there's a few instances of that. That's how I deal with bypassing the inventory. It's sort of cutting out the middleman. But aside from that, it's a 2D point and click. I'm calling it more of a detective game rather than an adventure game.
Yeah, it looks very much like an investigation game, not like a puzzle combined inventory with each other.
There are puzzles, but it's not inventory puzzles. Like you're not going to be making weird items to like fish things out of drains or something.
Essentially, it would be a Sherlock Holmes game if it would play in the actual Victorian England.
Yeah, sure, but it would be a Sherlock Holmes game too if you were a great detective. But the fun part is that you can be a terrible detective, and so you're not you're not feeling this sort of disconnect of, oh, this guy's a genius, but I'm not quite connecting with how he's figuring these things out. So yeah.
How far along in development are you?
The game itself is fully playable with placeholders and everything. I just need to finish up the art and get some polish and record the voice acting and all that. But we're hoping to have it out by April or May of 2018.
So about half a year from now.
About 6 to 7 months from now, yeah.
You're here on the booth of Application Systems Heidelberg. So you are working with a publisher this time?
Yes, Application Systems Heidelberg was very kind to pick up the game, and they'll be publishing it. So there will be a German localization as well.
Are you also planning voiceover?
Yes, voiceover. Probably going to be recording the voiceover within the next month or two, hopefully. So yeah, it'll have English voiceover. I don't believe it'll have German voiceover, but it'll have German subtitles.
Are you working with actors you've already worked before? Can you already reveal something about that?
Well, we haven't cast anybody yet, but I am working with the same casting director that I worked with on Shardlight and A Golden Wake, who's in New York, and I am using local New York actors, and so I am leaning heavily towards using actors that I've worked with before that I know will put in great performances and will be efficient. So yeah, it'll probably be a lot of similar actors in Shardlight, but not like the exact same cast, because I'm open to having new people, just not and yeah.
What platforms are you aiming at?
PC and Mac and iOS eventually, I imagine. iOS I believe we're aiming for as well. I don't know if it'll be a simultaneous release on all three, but I know that we're looking for a simultaneous PC Mac release.
Okay, looking forward to that. Thank you very much for the interview and good luck with the last half year of development.
Thank you, my pleasure.